Is back into it in Chester. Here's El Senior. Yes! Yes!
The center back, Jacob Glesnes.
Is going for it.
Oh my goal! What a goal!
And that will do it! One of the best comebacks in recent years. 3 unanswered by the Union. And they go into the Gold Cup break, winning it 3-2.
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and it is officially the start of the 2022 MLS Playoffs, with the Philadelphia Union getting a first-round bye after they defeated Toronto FC by a score of 4-0. And good thing, too, right? Because we saw Montreal destroy Inter Miami. And, it could have been problematic for the Union if they would have blew that game. But like Jim Curtin told us after Charlotte, he's like, I have full confidence that my team will take care of business. And now we all get to sit home, relax, and just watch MLS Cup playoffs this week, find out who the Union take on out of New York Red Bulls or FC Cincinnati. And we will get to that discussion tonight. I told you guys last episode, there's just way too much to talk about in that episode. So I was like, I have to make 2 episodes. And I told you guys last episode, and if you didn't listen to the last episode, we are joined tonight by a very special guest, his second time on the podcast, Mr. Skyler Hoffner, the social media admin for Philly Sports Nation. Skyler, welcome back to the podcast. How you doing, man?
Good. Thanks for having me back on. I enjoyed my first time, and I'm glad to talk Philly Union soccer playoffs.
For sure. And I gotta do it for the podcast. I know I've probably said it like a million times, but thank you so much for all your help this season in the press box. Show me where to go and everything, and just show me the ropes, how to act in the press box. So I appreciate you for that. And Nico, we'll assume he's listening to the podcast. Shout out to Nico for sitting us together finally in the press box. So it was a great 2022 regular season to sit, I feel like, majority of the season in there and get to know everybody in there, and get to know you a little bit better. And what a season was for the Union, right?
Yeah, couldn't ask for anything better.
Would you say that the team exceeded your expectations, or is this exactly where you thought they would be?
Exactly where I thought they would be, fighting for the Supporters' Shield up at the top of the Eastern Conference like they should have been.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll go ahead and review. I know some of you guys might be listening and say, hey, you did predictions at the beginning of the season. You're right. This isn't going to be that episode where I talk about those predictions. I'll wait till hopefully MLS Cup's done, and we'll talk about those predictions. But tonight's show, we're just going to talk about Union Awards. And if you guys remember last year, I did similar topics last year with my sister and Ed Fagan. And so I was like, okay, well, let's do it a little bit earlier. Let's have 2 podcasts, because we haven't done that in forever, in 1 week. And like I said, who better than to get Skyler on the podcast? And the first award we'll start with tonight is Defender of the Year. So you go, and then I go. I won't go over my whole list. So for you, who would you say was the Union's best defender?
This is the toughest one for me, but I have to go with Kai Wagner with the 14 assists. Without him this year, going up that left side, all them whipped in crosses and all those free kicks, who knows how many goals Carranza, and Gazdak have this year. He's been the centerpiece of the attack this year, and I just think he was the best defender in the year for the Union.
Yeah, for sure. And you hit the nail right on the head. The toughest decision. You can even put like Jack Elliott in that conversation. I think, there is an argument to be made that Jack Elliott had a better season than Jacob Glesnes, but I am giving my Defender of the Year for the Union to Jacob Glesnes. Played every single minute this season, the only outfield player to do that this season. He had 57 interceptions, second amongst center backs, 31 blocks, also second amongst center backs. He was huge for the Union. One play for Jacob Glesnes, and he had a ton of great plays this year, but that butt save that he had down in Atlanta where Andre Blake makes a save, and then Glesnes is there to make a save, and then eventually Jack Elliott clears the ball. It was a chaotic play, and it's awesome to be there in person, but it's like one of those plays that just like your heart's beating so fast. It's like, don't concede, and you see Andre come up with a huge save, and then the 2 center backs doing what they've done all season, just helping keep that clean sheet. And Kai Wagner is a great shout too with his assists, most assists ever for a defender in the season. And it's crazy to see a left back have 15 assists in the season. I mean, that's unheard of. And Uh, we talk about it all the time. Union fans, media members, like he is our attack going down the left side of the field. Without Kai Wagner, Leon Flock's not offering you that much offensive capabilities down the left side, and thank goodness for Kai Wagner.
Yeah, because Flock doesn't give you any attack out there. Flock's staying back, and Kai's just taking that whole left wing. Like I said, without Kai, who knows how many attacking opportunities Ua and Carranza get in the 18.
For sure, and I'm glad you brought up Ua because we'll move on to Newcomer of the Year, and I think this is a choice between only two players. It's the two strikers, and I'm curious which one you're going to go with.
I'm going with the one that fans probably won't like, but I'm going with Julian Carranza. The 14 goals and 9 assists, just that his hold-up play helps the Union out so much. Just laying it off to Gazdag and Gazdag being able to just take those shots. It's just Carranza has done a little bit more than Ua. He stayed more healthy this year. He's been reliable for the Union, and I feel like he's shown up this year, and he's proved that he's a number 9 in this league.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't have said it better. We talk about it all the time. I talk about it all the time on this podcast where we were pissed that Julian Carranza was coming on loan from Inter Miami, where people look at his stats, only 3 goals in his time in Miami. People were wondering why you bringing a player in from Miami. That was terrible. And again, Ernst Tenner proves that he knows what he's doing, bringing in a player that fits into a team. And you look at that Miami team when he was there. That wasn't a team. He comes into a proper team where, okay, we're not going to build around Julian Carranza. We're going to build around the team. We think you're one of the missing pieces of the puzzle piece. But I'm glad that you and I, so far, we're not saying, okay, I agree with that player. I agree with that. I'm going with Mikel Ua, 13 goals, 6 assists. I did not expect Mikel Ua to hit 13 goals this season. I said if he gets lucky, 10 goals, like you said. Wasn't able to stay as healthy as Julian Carranza. Thank goodness as the season went on, he got healthier, played more minutes. But just seeing him be the second on the team with shots on target with 68%. Daniel Gazdag leads the team with 69%. Daniel Gazdag also the most accurate shooter in MLS. So to have 2 players on the same team be the 2 most accurate shooters in MLS, that's a great recipe for success going into the playoffs. You look at his goals per 90, it's 4th in MLS, 0.716. 0.28 goals per shot. That's tied second with Daniel Gazdag in MLS. Mikel Ua, we saw at the beginning of the season. Hopefully, I'm working on a piece that I want to write. I have all these notes that I've been working on. So hopefully I get something up on the website to break down what exactly the Union did from weeks 19 to 31 that made them so successful. But you look, weeks 1 through 18, like you mentioned, Mikel Ua wasn't healthy. And I think maybe that's why we see a lot of the draws early in the season, because you're going with Corey Burke, you're going with Sergio Santos, you're going with Paxton Aronson up top. And so Julian Carranza didn't have that player that he can feel the most comfortable with, build that chemistry with. Same with Daniel Gazdag. And then you add Mikel Ua, who finally gets healthy. We see what the front 3 does, but either one of those guys, of course, are going to win Newcomer of the Year. And you're right, it's probably going to be split. Some people are probably going to go with Julian Carranza, some are going to go with Mikel, but that duo of those 2 up top, that's what DP strikers do for you, right?
Mm-hmm. Dangerous duo for years to come, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully he is right. But we know in January when that transfer market opens up, teams are desperate for goal scorers, and so could the Union potentially get blown away by an offer? I do think so, but hopefully they're here for another season, and we'll enjoy these guys for as long as we have them. But the next award is Homegrown of the Year. I think we'll probably agree on this together.
I have Jack McGlynn. He's had 1,009 minutes this year. He had 9 starts and 23 total games played, and he had a goal and 3 assists. He, for me, when filling in for Bedoya, played fantastic. He overachieved this year, in my opinion, and that's great for the Union organization. And he just fits so well on that left side when he's playing that left side. He's on the right side. He's been okay this year, but when he's playing that left flank, he's unstoppable.
For sure, and that's an interesting point that you just brought up, where he looks a lot better on the left side compared to the right. We saw him play on the right for Ali Bedoya against Toronto. We also saw him play on the right against New York Red Bulls away. Jim Curtin today in his press conference said that Ali Bedoya did not feel comfortable after the game playing against Toronto. He still feels the injury. He hasn't practiced at all this week. And yeah, thank goodness we have 10 days until the game against either New York Red Bulls or Cincinnati. But would you feel confident going into that playoff game not having LA's leadership with Jack McGlynn on the right side of the field?
He's got enough minutes under his belt this year, so I'd feel comfortable. I think he can get the job done. He's shown us he can get the job done, so I'd feel pretty comfortable with him over there. He's got enough minutes under his belt.
Yeah, I agree with you. And my Homegrown of the Year is Jack McGlynn, too. I said the same thing last year, and I remember talking about it last year, just looking at all the Homegrowns that came up last year together, Brandon Craig, Quinn Sullivan, Paxton Aronson, and Jack McGlynn. I thought after the end of the last season that Jack McGlynn would be the first to go out of that bunch, sold to Europe. And just watching him play this season, and now that further cements what I feel about Jack McGlynn, because when you play him a little bit deeper and he can just ping those balls around, like you said, 3 assists, and he didn't start a whole bunch of games this season. But I thought the one knock I had on Jack McGlynn was I felt like he wasn't quick enough. He didn't do enough of the defensive work where Jose Martinez at times, Leon Flock had a cover for him defensively. But as the season went on, Jack McGlynn got better defensively, in my opinion. And if Jack McGlynn can continue to, find those defensive skills, it wouldn't be crazy to say that Jack McGlynn's sold in the summertime because he's been that good and he's huge for the U20s. And you give him more minutes, and we all saw him come onto the scene last year against Nashville where he took a huge penalties, ice in the veins, and you're like, okay, this is a player. Jim Curtin would be picky when he would give him his minutes last season, but this year, when you see Jack McGlynn's coming in around the 65th, 60th minute, you feel confident that, okay, he can do a job. He's going to make a difference. Or if he's getting that occasional start, you know that, okay, he's going to do his job. And like I said, as the season went on, that defensive side where I was a little bit concerned about, he definitely did a job. And would you agree with that? Jack McGlynn would be the next homegrown player sold to Europe? Or do you think somebody could come in January, be desperate enough for a Paxton Aronson or Quinn Sullivan?
I agree. Jack McGlynn has shown this year that he's Europe ready. And once he gets a little bit more defensive effort in him, he'll be sold to Europe in the next few months, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about Kai Wagner having the best left foot on this team, or we've talked about how Harris Mandunian's had the best left foot in Union history, but I'd put Jack McGlynn's left foot up there with both of those guys. And you give him another year, another half a year with the Union, he could have the best pass, best foot, whatever you want to say, the Union have ever seen, the more comfortable he gets playing with this team. But let's go on to maybe a topic that maybe people want to shy away from. That's biggest disappointment on the season. Now, this could be either a player or it could be a moment or moments. However you want to take this, Skyler, what is your biggest disappointment on the year?
Well, it's probably going to be a couple people's. I got that 4-0 loss to Charlotte FC in week 33. That really shut down the Union Supporter Shield chances, and we really needed to get a result out of that if we wanted the Supporter Shield at all. But yeah, that's got to be it for me. And the player, I have two. And the player, the disappointing player, I felt like he should have got a little bit more minutes this year, Quinn Sullivan. He only had 17 games played with 1 start, and he had 1 goal in just 230 minutes. I wish he would have earned a little bit more playing time on that right flank when Bedoya comes out, but that's just Jack McGlynn playing so good that he's earning that even on the right side instead of the left.
That's a good shout. Quinn Sullivan, I mean, this is a guy who was super talented coming out of the academy. And the whole reason he got a first-team contract is because of how talented he was. He was a winger in the academy, but we all know the first team doesn't play with wingers. And so credit to Jim Curtin and this coaching staff for trying to find ways to get Quinn Sullivan into the lineup, whether it be as a second striker, whether it be on the right side of the field, whether it's changing up the formation and playing him out on the wing. But yeah, I mean, that's a good shout. And I did not even have a player written down, but I think if I was to give a player, I would say Quinn Sullivan. It's kind of like a Jack DeVries situation, right? Where there was just no spot for him, and eventually he gets sold, and first, I guess, on loan, and then Venecia enjoyed him so much that they eventually bought him. The Union did right by Jack DeVries and said, hey, look, you did well last year with the U19s, I believe he was playing with. And if you get opportunities with the first team, go for it. And the Union let him stay in Italy. And maybe we see something like that with a Quinn Sullivan or even a Brandon Craig, honestly, where let's face it, Brandon Craig's probably not going to break into the starting 11 with Jacob Glesnes and Jack Elliott. He's not going to play as the number 6. And so there's really, like we talk about, okay, there's not many spots for Quinn Sullivan. There's even less chances for Brandon Craig to play. So if he's happy staying in this organization, playing with U2, captaining U2, then I'm sure he'll be around. But there are some fans that believe Brandon Craig should be playing that have the abilities to play at least in the USL, which I would say is probably accurate. But I mean, if he's enjoying his time playing with U2, being with the Union's first team, then definitely keep him. I think some people would say if the season had ended maybe 10 weeks ago, 15 weeks ago, I think majority of the fans would have said Corey Burke with the season he had. But, as the season went on, he added some crucial goals. He was pressing, which we didn't see earlier on in the season. He actually started to show that he actually cares. Like, he'd come on the field 10, 15 minutes, and then afterwards wouldn't care. But once he got left off the Jamaican national team, I think that's kind of ignited a fire in him to give a little bit more effort. Now, we did see back in September the 27th, I want to say, when Jamaica played Argentina, Corey Burke, again, wasn't called up to the national team. Maybe eventually he'll get caught up with them getting a new coach, but I'm happy that Corey Burke's changed his effort that he was giving the team as opposed to what he was doing at the beginning of the season. But for myself, biggest disappointment, I would say the 5 straight draws from April 23rd to May 18th. In those 5 straight draws, they had 5 blown leads, including 2 against LAFC. And it's something that I talked about at the beginning of the season, saying, yeah, it's an issue where the Union blew a total of 9 leads throughout the season, but that's something we didn't talk about at all in the second half of the season. I can remember Greg Oldfield, who writes for the Brotherly Game, Matt DeGeorge, all writing articles about how the Union have blown leads. And once the second half started, they corrected those issues. But if there's anything to be picky and choosy about, and I know Jim Curtin says it all the time, that this isn't a complete team. We haven't seen a complete performance. I don't know. I mean, like, they played pretty well this whole season. I mean, to say that, yeah, we haven't seen a complete performance yet when you're blowing out teams 6-0, 7-0, 4-0, it makes me excited to see what could potentially come in the playoffs. But, yeah, I would say there's 5 straight draws, which the team eventually corrected.
Yeah, that was my close second as well.
But let's go on to the biggest award. And I think we're going to agree on this one. We may not, and that's cool. But Union MVP.
Another really hard one. Andre Blake. He's up for MVP, MLS MVP, and I had that before the finalists came out today. But he's the heart and soul of the Union behind Alejandro Bedoya. He's been here for, gosh, it feels like the beginning. But with 100 saves and 15 clean sheets on the year, leading the league, he's the backbone of this Union team, and he makes this team run. In my opinion, he's the most crucial to this team.
Yeah, he always gets the captain's armband when Ali's not out there. It's Andre Blake. And you brought up a point about 5 minutes ago, and you said your biggest disappointment was that 4-0 defeat to Charlotte. And if the Union wouldn't have conceded 4 goals in that game, if they would have just conceded 1, then Andre Blake 100% would have been my MVP. And you guys heard me talk with Phil Wedden. I've said it a couple times where, yeah, Andre Blake should be MVP. Like you just mentioned, the 5 finalists finally came out for the MLS MVP. And to everybody's surprise, no Daniel Gazdag, Javier Hernandez. You had Aranga with LAFC. You had Mukhtar, you had Jersey, and Andre Blake. I mean, you definitely could have Andre Blake and Daniel Gazdag in there. I don't know how Javier Hernandez got in there, especially where you look. Like, LA Galaxy barely got into the playoffs, where they could have had the playoffs wrapped up a lot sooner than they did, but Chicharito kept missing penalties. And to have him as a finalist, maybe not maybe. it's got to be LA bias, right? You have two LA players in there. Like we all know MLS loves their LA market. And maybe it makes sense. Maybe that's the reason why we have two LA players in the top five finalists. But for me, because Andre Blake conceded 4 goals, which weren't his fault, but 4 goals still won it in the back of the net. I'm giving it to Daniel Gazdag, and we'll get to league MVP and all that stuff here in a little bit. But 22 goals, 10 assists, most goals in a single season. And I've really enjoyed sitting with you this season, listening who your picks are, who's going to score and everything. You're like, oh, Daniel Gazdag is going to score a brace. He's going to score a hat trick. And you've called, I feel like, every single prediction when we're sitting next to each other and we're just pounding each other knuckles. And you're like, I told you I called it. And just every single person in the press box, like we've all been in awe watching what Daniel Gazdag's done this season. To break the all-time goal scored in the single season, to have 32 goal contributions this season. I knew Daniel Gazdag was going to be good last season, but I didn't expect him to have 32 goals. And we heard him say on Sunday, yeah, I honestly didn't think I was going to score this many goals. He said 10 goals, 10 assists, I believe it was, and he came out with 22 goals. And if it wasn't for those 4 goals conceded against Charlotte, Andre Blake would have been MVP for me. But it's so close, like you said, right? At the end of the day, the whole team is the MVP. It's not one player.
Exactly.
But as we wrap up the Union Awards, what are your top 3 moments throughout the season?
My biggest one is that 7-0 win over DC. That it felt like we were scoring every other 5 minutes. That was my favorite. And then another one that was a spark plug for the second half of the season was the home NYCFC match where Burke had that deflection in late in stoppage time. And it was called, I think it was called offside at first. And then VAR overturned it. And we were on the press box, didn't know what was going to happen. But I feel like that turned the second half of the season around. And then just to clinch the East, the Daniel Gazdag decision day hat trick.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that Daniel Gazdag and Julian Kranza would have 2 hat tricks going into the season? Not me. And to have 2 players, let alone 1 player, score a hat trick. We had 2 players score 2 hat tricks throughout the season. I mean, things that have never been seen ever in Union history. Well, just talking about how all these records have been broken in the press box. You guys are talking about it on social media, trying to find out, okay, what record was broken? Oh, wait, I forgot to write this down. Let me go back and find this. I mean, this is such a historic season, and it would suck to see it end the first game in the playoffs, and hopefully it doesn't. And we'll give our predictions here in a bit. But my top 3 moments this season, and like you guys know, this is my first year sitting in the press box, and it could have been easy for me just to say, okay, this is my favorite moment in the press box. This was my favorite moment. This was my favorite moment. But I try to stay away from that. Number 1, it will have to do with me being in the press box, but it was the 6-0 victory at DC United, first away trip as media. That was a little bit daunting because there was a game, as some of my listeners will know, where I literally decided 2 days before that I would go down, because you have to give, for people that are listening, you have to give the PR managers 48 hours notice in advance to let them know, hey, I'm going, get me on the list. And yeah, I was like, I'm not going down here because traffic sucks. But then I kept seeing more and more fans say they're going down there. And I'm like, I kind of want to see this. I want to see this big atmosphere. And if I get approved to go down, all right, it's cool. And it was like the day before the game. I was like, wow, so I haven't got an email back from DC United. I'm probably not going to get approved or whatever, let alone here's the email sitting in my spam folder. I'm like, I guess I'm going down to DC. And so, yeah, that will always stick out in my mind. First away trip as a media member. And number 2 on that list, you talked about a spark plug, the New York City game at home was. I'm going with the away game, 2-0 away victory against New York City, a first win at Yankee Stadium, and the club would then go on and break their away wins record with a 7-5-5 record. The previous record was 6. I believe they did that in 2018 and 2019. I should know about this because I read an article on it. But, when there's so many stats and your brain goes crazy trying to think of all the stats, you lose track of just how many records the Union set throughout the season. But, yeah, that 2-0 away victory, and I think that was also the start where we're like, okay, Daniel Gazdag scoring pretty early, gets a goal in that game. Ali Bedoya scores in that game, and none of us could have predicted that Ali Bedoya was going to have a career year. I believe 6 goals. I almost said 10 goals. 6 goals, I believe it was. And I know there was chatter where some of us felt like maybe he should have been called up to the national team for the World Cup. You know, you need that veteran presence. I know Ali's been away from the national team for forever, but that's a young team. And we'll see what the U.S. does come 2022 Qatar. But I still feel like they're missing a veteran presence, and maybe Greg Berhalter surprises us and calls in a veteran. Maybe Michael Bradley. He's not calling him Michael Bradley, but I don't know. I think it would have been special to see LA go to the World Cup, even though he's been away from the national team forever. I remember being in DC after the game. Jim Curtin said that he wanted to have some discussions with Greg Berhalter on why he should bring LA to the national team. And I don't know if they ever did have those discussions, but it would have been nice to see LA included. And I know we're still 34, 35 days away from the World Cup, so maybe we get surprised, but yeah, I would bet against it. And then number 3 for me, it would be Stuart Finley, just staying that extra week, even though the Union agreed a deal with Oxford United. You know, Stu said he wanted to make sure the club would be in a good place with Jack Elliott out injured. And throughout his time just talking via Zoom or talking in the locker room, I mean, he was just such a nice, genuine guy. And to say, hey, look, I'm not getting playing time here for the club, but he was still putting the Union first. Even though there was a deal already agreed upon, he was to go to England. And he stayed that extra week to make sure the Union were covered as a center back. And I'll always be grateful for Stuart Finley. And you got to see just how much Stuart Finley meant to the players in that locker room.
And you got to mention, he played pretty darn good in those 2 games, too.
He did.
He showed out in his final 2 games.
He did. And what a way to end it. I believe a clean sheet too to end it. But yeah, what a guy, Stuart Finley. And for a player that was only here for a year and a half to really mean that much to fans in the locker room just speaks of the guy's character. And he'll go down as a cult hero. And I remember he said him and his wife, when it's summertime, we'll come back to Philadelphia to visit. And I don't think that he's lying. I think he's 100% telling the truth, because we would see on social media, he would go to Flyers games all the time and be posting on Instagram. And so, yeah, I think we will definitely see Stuart Finley back here in Philadelphia, maybe not playing, but definitely visiting. So this is something on my show that I talked about a couple episodes ago, where I was talking about who the Union should protect in the expansion draft. And so I won't say who I want, because I said that already in an episode. So I'm going to, throughout the next couple weeks or whatever, when I keep having Union fans on the podcast, or if we go live on Twitter Spaces, or have other journalists come on the podcast, I do want to get their opinion who they would protect. So we all know homegrown players are protected. For me, I said it comes down to Jesus Brenner or Richard Adade. For you, who would you say? Maybe it's neither one of those guys.
I had Odada in there. Yeah. If we don't transfer Martinez and Wagner before the draft happens, I'm leaving off Burke and Bueno and keeping Odada.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what like a lot of people on Union social media, Union Twitter said is the same thing. And I guess that one appearance that Union fans got to see him in against Pachuca in the friendly, I guess they impressed enough. I was not able to watch that game on vacation. Did you go to that match? No?
No, I didn't. I seen that highlight, and that highlight gets me excited. That the nice body off the ball and just sending that cross over top just got me excited, just in case if Jose Martinez just isn't here next year.
Yeah, you know, you have a replacement. And to play for a team like Red Star Belgrade in Europe, I know he wasn't getting as much playing time as he probably would have hoped, because if he was, then no way he would be here in Philadelphia. But it's a great team over there in Europe, a lot of history, and Ernst Tanner has a keen eye for talent, for players that fit into the team. And so I do think that's a good shout. If you guys remember, I said Jesus Bueno. I'm not going to go into why. Listen a couple episodes ago and you'll find out. It's in the show notes, whatever episode that was. So you guys can find that episode if you want. But let's go ahead and talk about this weekend's playoff game between New York Red Bulls and FC Cincinnati. Jim Curtin said it. It is 100% guaranteed whoever the Union play, they're coming off of a high of a playoff victory where the Union had 10 days off. So the momentum is going to be into whichever one of these teams come into Subaru Park. Where you look at Cincinnati against the Union this season, the Union did not get a win. 1-1 draw at Subaru Park. The Union lose 3-1 in Cincinnati. 4-1 in Cincinnati, right? Or was it 3-1? 4-1? 3-1. It was definitely 3-1. And
3-1.
the Union gave up 4 goals this season against Cincinnati, and they had 2 goals for. Where you look at Cincinnati's away record this season, 6 wins, 4 losses, 7 draws, which I was shocked that they only had 4 road losses this season. 27 goals for, 29 goals against. Fourth most goals scored in MLS this season with 64. And a stat that I found right before we came on here and started recording this podcast, the connection between Acosta and Brenner. Brenner has scored 7 times from Luciano Acosta's ball. So that's a combination that we've seen work against the Union this season, and it's worked against majority of teams in MLS. While New York Red Bulls against the Union this season, the Union had 1 win and 1 draw, where the Union drew at Subaru Park, just like they did against Cincinnati. The Union scored 3 goals and 1 goal against, and on the road, New York Red Bulls are a lot better of a team on the road than they are at home, and maybe that plays into Cincinnati's favor this weekend, where Red Bulls were 9-5-3 this season on the road with 29 goals for and 19 goals against. For you, Skyler, which one of these teams would you want to see the Union play?
It's got to be Red Bull. Pat Noonan knows this Union team from head to toe, and I'm pretty sure they're the only Eastern Conference team we didn't get a win against. We drew them and lost to them. So having them come into Subaru Park off of their first MLS playoff win would be a dangerous task. And we've had the Red Bulls number over the past 3-4 seasons. If we do play them, that'll be 3 out of the last 4 playoffs we'll play them in. And hopefully we could beat them again. But who knows how much more luck we'll have against them. But ultimately, I'd pick Red Bull over FC Cincinnati.
That's a good shout. I mean, it shouldn't have went by my mind, and maybe some of you guys listening, maybe it hasn't went by your mind, but yeah, Cincinnati is the only team this season the Union have not beat in the Eastern Conference. But I want to play a clip here for you guys real quick. I asked Jim Curtin, with people's predictions of brackets coming out, a lot of people in the national media are predicting the Union are going to win MLS Cup this season. And so I asked Jim Curtin, how do you deal with those kind of expectations? Do you guys drown it out? And this is what Jim Curtin had to say.
No, you just play the next game. You have to. That's got to be our mentality. We've had a good season. We recognize we can beat anybody, but we also respect the fact that anybody can beat us. We had some losses this year in the teams that beat us when we weren't prepared and weren't on our best. Maybe weren't the highest finishing in the standings. So, you have to have a real respect for the game. It's a part of the year where, everything gets magnified and becomes difficult. But, look, it's nice to be called a favorite. But that doesn't really mean anything because the games are played on the field. We recognize that. We've shown a lot of clips of what we've done good this season with some film sessions and still some things that we can work on because we're not a perfect team, just like, there is no perfect team in this league. So, we look forward to the playoffs. We're really excited. I know our fans are as well, and the players will be ready to go.
And so right away, one thing that sticks out to me in that clip from Jim Curtin, he said that, we had some losses this year and the teams that beat us, we weren't prepared and they beat us. Maybe we weren't at our best. And I can't help but to think that that's Jim Curtin talking about Cincinnati without saying Cincinnati. And you brought up a good point. They lost in Cincinnati and they drew against Cincinnati at home. And that game at home against Cincinnati, the Union get an early goal and then they let their foot off the gas pedal. They feel like this is Cincinnati of the old. They're just going to roll over. We got that early goal. And that's not what happened. Cincinnati brought it to them, got that goal from Brandon Vasquez off a corner kick, I want to believe it was, a header. And the Union, I feel like we're a little bit shell-shocked. We see it against Charlotte, where 2 of those goals, the Union could have prevented them, but people were jogging. People were slow to the ball to shut it down. And I do wonder who Jim Curtin and this coaching staff would rather play out of New York Red Bulls or Cincinnati, where, yeah, Pat Noonan's not let Jim Curtin get the best out of him yet. Pat Noonan knows every single player. He knows what Jim Curtin's thinking. You hope Jim Curtin doesn't overthink it if Cincinnati is the team. New York Red Bulls, like you said, if we play them, it's 3 times in 4 years, and we've been fortunate to win those 2 games previously with extra time being included in both of those games. Last year, Jacob Glesnes scores that banger of a goal. Marco Fabian scores a goal that was 100% across in 2019. And I don't know how much more fans can take of more extra time from New York Red Bulls and Philadelphia Union. These 2 teams know each other way too well, just like Cincinnati and the Union. But the thing about New York Red Bulls and the Union, they play the same exact way. Where Cincinnati, Jim Curtin mentioned it previously today, where he said that, yes, Cincinnati play a different style than New York Red Bulls. You know what you're going to get from New York Red Bulls. But it does concern me that the Union haven't been able to figure out how to beat Cincinnati. And because of that, I want to see them get it done in the playoffs, because when does it matter the most? The playoffs. It doesn't matter what you do in the regular season. I can't be able to sit there and just not worry about more extra time coming in a New York Red Bulls playoff game against the Philadelphia Union. Maybe that is eventually what happens, but I think Pat Noonan and his team are going to be fully motivated to go into New York Red Bulls Arena this weekend and come out with a victory. And so I think it's going to be Cincinnati versus Philadelphia Union at Subaru Park, October 20th.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think FC Cincinnati gets it done.
And I mean, this is a matchup that nobody wanted to see. But at the same time, too, you look at the form that Miami was going into the playoffs. And so I know they got blown out by Montreal, but maybe that's a one-off game. Maybe that's what they needed to, get their minds right going into the playoffs. Yes, they had a lot to play for, a home playoff game. They did not get that. Playoffs were still guaranteed. And Miami's been terrific at home this season. So, yeah, it meant a lot for them to get that home playoff game. They did not. They go to New York City, and unfortunately, the Union have a tough draw, and we'll see what happens. I would love to know what you guys think. Let us know on social media at Free Kick Pod, at Philly Union Nation. Is that the handle?
Mm-hmm.
PHL?
Yep. PHL, Philly, PHL Union Nation.
There we go. So go ahead, hit us up with your thoughts. Who you guys would rather see in the playoffs, Cincinnati and New York Red Bulls. But let's go ahead, talk about MLS Awards. And let's start with your best 11. And I heard Tom Bogert and Matt Doyle say that they hate how MLS has you choosing, you need 3 forwards, and you're playing players out of their position the way that they have the best 11 set. I saw Joe Tanzi put out a tweet. He's like, nah, screw this. I'm giving my players in their actual positions. I saw, who else did that? Tom Bogert also did that. But for your MLS best 11, who would be in there?
I have Ferreira, Vasquez, and like you were just mentioning, I have Mukhtar playing up top. Those are my forwards. Midfield, I have Driussi, Luciano Acosta, and Daniel Gazdag. And then I have Wagner, Callens, Glesnes, and Alistar Johnston.
Ooh.
And then Blake in goal.
Ooh, Alistar Johnson. That's a good shout. I mean, what a terrific season he's had from Montreal, leaving Nashville and going in we knew he was good with Nashville, but he's taken his game farther with Montreal, and that's a big reason why Montreal was amongst one of the best attackers, because of what he provided on the right side of the field for them this season. For me, and I hate playing players out of position, but this is what MLS wants. So in goal, I have Andre Blake. No surprise there. Jacob Glesnes and Kai Wagner. And I was going back and forth between Walker Zimmerman or Alexander Callens. And eventually I went with Alexander Callens, because how can you not? 12 clean sheets he helped New York City keep, where Walker Zimmerman only helped Nashville keep 5. Collins had provided a ton of goals for New York City this season. And yeah, I mean, you guys might hate New York City. because of what happened last year in the playoffs. But we could both agree he's a great center back, and I do think that he will make the best 11 this year in MLS. For my midfield, I went with Ilie, the center defensive midfield for LAFC, Ilie Sanchez. He's always getting the attack started. Great tackle of the ball. His just vision's really, really good with LAFC. So he's my 6 in the midfield. Yeah, you got to play players out of position. Luciano Acosta, Daniel Gazdag, and Hani Mukhtar, with the 3 players up top, Drusi, Ferreira. And for me, I'm going with Brenner. Vasquez is right there for me, but I ultimately went with Brenner because of him scoring 9 goals, 2 assists in his last 5 matches. I mean, he really turned it up this season, but either one of those guys, you can't go wrong with. Both finished with 18 goals for FC Cincinnati, and both of those guys are a big reason why they're in the playoffs this season.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I was fumbling back and forth between them two, but I just had to go Brandon Vasquez.
Let's go ahead and talk about. Let's get the big one out of the way first. League MVP.
Hani Mukhtar. He's everything for Nashville. Without him, Nashville to me are nothing. But Mukhtar.
Yeah, I don't have to say anything else. I beat this drum last year, and we all knew Carlos Gil won MVP, even though Hani Mukhtar should have won it. Again, Hani Mukhtar reproduces what he did last year with Nashville, ups his game another level by winning the Golden Boot. And, yeah, I mean, you hit it. Without Hani Mukhtar, Nashville and nothing. Defender of the Year.
Kai Wagner.
No surprise there with you saying that he's your Union MVP, and I guess it's no surprise for you guys. I'm going with Jacob Glesnes. But either way, I would be shocked if Alexander Collins. By the way, we should bring this up, right? I totally forgot to bring this up. So we're recording this podcast on Thursday night, October 13th. And MLS released the end of the year finalists. We were talking a little bit about the league MVP with Christian Arango, LAFC, Andre Blake, Sebastian Drusi, Austin, Javier Chicharita Hernandez, and Hani Mukhtar with Nashville, and no Daniel Gazdag. And we look at the MLS Young Player of the Year, Thiago Almeida, Brenner, and Jesus Ferrer with Dallas. How can you have a player? Yes, Thiago Almeida has been great, and maybe that's going to be your Young Player of the Year. But I don't know. It's weird seeing a player on that list that's not in the playoffs with Atlanta United and Thiago Almeida. But your MLS Young Player of the Year, who do you have?
Jesus Ferreira. Yeah. I just felt like he was dominant this year, and hopefully he plays for that U.S. men's national team this World Cup.
Yeah, man. It was between him and Brenner for me, and I was going back and forth. Like on my phone, I had one thing. On my notes, I had one thing. I'm like, oh, let me cross this out. And ultimately, I chose Brenner, but Jesus Ferrer was right there with me. And I do think ultimately he's going to be the one that wins the award. But Brenner, 1.05 goals plus assists per game, 0.79 goals scored per 90 minutes, 3rd in MLS, 9 goals, 2 assists, like I mentioned, in his last 5 games. And in those 5 matches, Cincinnati went 3-1-1. A huge player, huge reason why Cincinnati had that push in the playoffs. And yeah, it's interesting, though. Neither one of us said Thiago Almeida, but the people that have votes apparently thought that he was deserving to be in there. Don't know how you vote a guy who's not in the playoffs in there, but...
Yeah, to me, he's bottom of the barrel out of those 3.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year. We don't need to talk about this. Andre Blake.
There's no other answer.
No, not at all. Let's go ahead and talk about the Newcomer of the Year. MLS had Thiago Almeida again on this list. They had Cucho, the striker from Columbus, on this list. And they had Petrovic, the goalkeeper from New England. For you, who would you go with, though?
And before even seeing that, I had Cucho Hernandez.
Yeah, huge
I just
player.
thought like he helped out that Columbus team significantly this year, even though they missed the playoffs.
Yeah, they were not going to make the playoffs. They were so far behind, and he gave them a small glimmer of hope. Came down to the last day. We're all watching that game on our laptops, watching the score in the press box, and we see the guy who I have is the Newcomer of the Year, Facundo Torres, scoring the game-winning penalty versus Columbus to get Orlando City in the playoffs. 9 goals, 10 assists. I know we didn't see it this year against the Union because the Union did a really good job shutting him out on the right side of the field. Every time he would want to cut in, the Union were forcing him away from goal. But you would see that the teams that we face, he would be a difference maker. And so for me, I went with Facundo Torres, comeback player of the year.
I have Kai Kamara with a close second, Ibo Bise. I just feel like Kai Kamara helped make that Montreal team go late in the year, and he got my vote.
100% same here. And Kai Kamara, Gonzalo Higuain, and Jeremy Abubisi were the three finalists on the list that MLS sent out on Thursday. But yeah, Kai Kamara, 9 goals this season. He hadn't scored 9+ goals since 2019 with Colorado, where he had 14. Also had seven assists. So a huge season for Kai Kamara, and that is the reason why I'm giving him Kai Kamara the comeback player of the year. But the final award we're talking about tonight is the coach of the year.
Wilfred Nancy. I just feel like he had that Montreal team on a whole nother level this season. They put the pressure on the Union late to make sure the Union had to keep winning late in the year. That's what the Union did. But I'm just not going Jim Curtin just because of that late collapse and not winning the Supporters' Shield. So it has to be Wilfred Nancy for me.
100% gets my vote. I had the same thing last year. I said Wilfred Nancy should have won it. They gave it to Bruce Arena because he won the Supporters' Shield last year in MLS. And look, we saw what happened with New England in the playoffs. First game against New York City. MLS had Wilfred Nancy, Jim Curtin, and the coach of LAFC. And so, yeah, Wilfred Nancy, I mean, like you said, had that team playing. And let's talk about, real quick, Montreal spent a hell of a lot less than LAFC. Spent less money, which is hard to believe, than the Philadelphia Union. And they were that close to winning the East this season. 11 wins on the road this season for Montreal. 11-4-2 was the road record. 9-5-3 at home. 8-1-1 in their last 10 matches. Like you said, put pressure on Philadelphia, where they had one loss. And if they didn't have that one loss, they're probably winning the East. And made it so close for the Philadelphia Union. I think if you ask Jim Curtin, I think his vote would probably go to Wilfred Nancy too. I don't think he would vote for himself. I know fans were upset not seeing Pat Noonan on here, but it just makes so much sense why you have all three. You're not going to leave the guy who won the Supporters' Shield off the list. You're not going to leave Jim Curtin because they won the East. And then Wilfred Nancy, we don't need to talk about anymore. Great coach. But before we wrap up this podcast, Skyler, do you have your bracket filled out yet for the playoffs?
I was going to do that tomorrow,
Okay.
but I have a final.
Okay, let's hear it.
Philadelphia Union, Nashville SC.
Wow, that's the same exact final that I have too. So let's go ahead and talk about that. I mean, if you had to predict, what would you say the final scoreline is going to be for that?
2-1 Union.
2-1. That's we saw a 1-1 last season, goes into penalties. Man, Daniel Gazai came up big right before halftime, I want to say, scores a overhead kick. Hani Mukhtar scores the opening goal. And yeah, we could have a battle between, should be 2 finalists for MVPs, but yeah, I guess the people that had votes say otherwise.
But for another day.
It is, but yeah, I'm with you right there. Nashville and Philadelphia Union. And I'll go ahead, Skyler, I won't make you give your list. I got to pull it up here on my phone. And I was like, do I want to fill this out yet? I was like, let's give us something else to talk about. So my bracket, I'll go ahead and start with the Western Conference, go to the Eastern Conference. So LAFC obviously get that bye. Then you have LA Galaxy versus Nashville. Well, I obviously said Nashville's going to be in the final, so I have Nashville over LA Galaxy. FC Dallas versus Minnesota. I have Dallas winning that match. Austin over Real Salt Lake, which would then set up LAFC and Nashville, and Dallas versus Austin. I have Nashville upsetting LAFC, and I also have Dallas upsetting Austin. In my Western Conference final, I have Nashville obviously taking it over Dallas, with that game going into penalties. I have it ending 1-1, goes into penalties. And then on the East, obviously the Union have the bye. We talked about it. You think New York Red Bulls. I sent Cincinnati. Cincinnati versus the Union. I have New York City beating Miami. Montreal beating Orlando. Union coming out on top. Hope we're right against Cincinnati. And Montreal over New York City with a Philadelphia Union Montreal final. I have the Union winning that game 2-0 with the Philadelphia Union. Sorry, I have that game 3 goals throughout that game. I have that game going to extra time with the Union finding the late equalizer in the second half. And the final, I have the Union winning 2-0 over Nashville. And man, I'm going to regret doing that because people have asked me all the time this season, give me predictions for the Union game. I've not done a single prediction this season. And yeah, you guys listening to the podcast, if something bad happens to the Union, blame me. I did not want to give a prediction, but everybody's talking about their brackets. And yeah, I just felt like I had to give my prediction. Got to get that content out there. But Skyler, it's been a blast having you on the podcast. Like I said earlier, enjoyed sitting next to you in the press box this season, and really appreciate you showing me around and showing me, what we do in the press box, and getting to know you better and watching you work hard. I say it all the time where you have Jonathan Tannenwald, those guys writing their articles as the game goes on. You're sitting right next to me typing play-by-plays, and I'm just trying to look up stats. I'm like, I don't know how these people are writing the articles. You're writing play-by-plays. I bring my friend Andrew Deal to do play-by-plays with me. I'm like, hey, you guys get all the credit with what you guys do, and one day I'll get on that level, but not yet.
It's a tough job, but hey, somebody's got to do it.
For sure. And where can people follow you on social media?
You can follow me on PHL Union Nation. That's where I live tweet every single game. And my personal Twitter is Sky_Hoff3. Simple
enough. And I'll leave both of those Twitter links, social media links in the show notes. And guys, we are super excited to be a part of Podcast Row at the 2023 United Soccer Coaches Convention in Philadelphia from January 11th to the 15th. You guys might be getting annoyed with me reading these ads, but guess what? I want to see you guys there. This is the convention for the ultimate event for soccer coaches, administrators, and fans of the beautiful game. Ignite your passion through captivating presentations, on-field demonstrations, exhibits, and networking events for any coaches. Hey, look, and not even coaches. You can go there as a fan of beautiful game and make these connections with these coaches, meet other podcasters, meet other like-minded people in the soccer world. Go out there and network, go to this event, and whether you guys are attending it alone, look, I'm attending this alone. We'll have a co-host, but at first I was going in alone, and I'm going to have a co-host. So don't feel bad if you're going in alone. I'll be there. You can talk to me. Or you're bringing the whole coaching staff. There's no better place for soccer coaches to learn, network, and experience the latest trends in soccer education. Visit www.unitedsoccercoachesconvention.org to register. Come join us as we celebrate our passion for the beautiful game. And if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow @FreeKickPod, wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick. And check out the website, thefreekick.net. Like I said earlier, working on an article that I want to get out for you guys to look at why the Union were able to turn around their season. And again, make sure you guys are following Skyler, checking out everything that he's doing on Twitter with Philly Union Nation. You won't get any better play-by-play when Andrew Deal's there with me. I think you give Skyler a run for his money, but when Andrew's not there, Skyler is definitely giving the best play-by-play updates on Twitter for you guys that aren't watching the game. But again, Skyler, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast tonight, and let's hope whatever happens this weekend in the playoffs, hopefully it's exciting, MLS goes wild, and we'll talk about whoever the Union play next week. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.